Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where we discuss exciting opportunities with outdoor careers, share professional experiences, and provide advice to overcome the hurdles to federal employment. I'm your host, Becky Shefelt, and today we have Chow, who is an aquatics biologist for the Mendocino National Forest in California. And he's going to explain what it is to be a biologist in the Forest Service and how he started his career, as well as provide advice for those that may want to pursue this type of career. Thank you for joining us today, Joe. Go ahead and tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, sounds good, Becky. Hey, everyone. Thank you for having me today, Becky. It's definitely an honor for me to be here and share my thoughts and my journey with my federal employment to this point. So my name is Chow. I'm from San Francisco, California. I'm of Chinese heritage, and I'm currently the district biologist for the Grindstone Ranger District of the Mendocino National Forest. So as the district biologist, I cover both the terrestrial as well as the aquatic side.
Great. So what are the responsibilities of a wildlife biologist working for the Forest Service?
So most of my duties include habitat management, as well as monitoring for any threatened, endangered, forest-sensitive, region-sensitive species. Most of the work I do is on the ground, whether I'm out in the field surveying for northern spotted owls or doing conducting stream surveys, and for foothill yellow-legged frogs or California red-legged frogs. So I do a varied amount of work, and once I complete all the field work, I run all that data through analysis, using that data to determine impacts to their habitat, critical habitat, suitable habitat, different aspects of their habitat, and to determine the impacts from proposed projects by the forest, whether they're salvage projects, types of logging projects, timber sales, trail projects, pretty much any type of forest projects that are proposed that would have any impact towards any of those terrestrial and aquatic habitats that I've briefly described.
So what you're doing out there is, or at least you and your crews are surveying to take inventory on what kind of endangered species are out there?
Yeah, that's correct, Becky. We do take a lot of inventory on our terrestrial and wildlife and aquatic species. For example, the northern spotted owls that we're dealing with on the Mendocino National Forest. They are a listed species, and in the past and recently we have not only surveyed for them, but we've also banded spotted owls as well. So that helps us, by banding these birds, that helps us keep track of populations and monitor over time. And unfortunately for that species, they are in decline, not only due to habitat loss, but also due to invasive species such as barred owls.
So what is the purpose of the work that you do in relation to the agency projects that you're working with?
So as far as the purpose of what we're doing, so just in general, I'll just give a general briefing for the Forest Service. So the main focus in general for the forest is land management. And in terms of wildlife, in a way, they almost take a little bit of a back seat. They're still important. All the species, all the habitat, critical habitat, suitable habitat, they're all extremely important. But my basic job is to manage their habitat and to do everything I can to mitigate all the impacts from all the proposed forest activities and forest projects. I guess that's the simplest way I can put that.
So you're providing recommendations to, I'm sure, a much larger team of different resource specialists to make sure that the projects that are proposed aren't going to degrade the habitats for wildlife species that you know of and have surveyed.
That's correct. So my goal is to make those recommendations and to do my best to protect and maintain the remaining suitable habitat we have left for all these threatened, endangered, and sensitive species, well, all the species, rather.
Why do you feel like the work you do contributes to overall public land stewardship?
That is a good question. So most of my direct work, like I've just kind of gone over, is wildlife habitat management. I would say most of my work I've been involved in over the years, whether it's been on the Mendocino or previous forests, directly ties in with habitat improvement the forests, all the projects that I've worked on may not have been geared toward restoring habitat for those specific species I've been working with, but indirectly, what I've done is manage the habitat, but also help improve areas where recreation and public use is important as well. I'll give you an example. Just with my previous projects I've had on El Dorado, I've mainly worked with endangered amphibian species in the Sierras. And most of those projects I've worked on were trail projects. Sure, I've done a lot of work with the amphibians along the trails and trying to protect their habitats based on riparian areas, meadows, streams. But while doing so, I've also contributed greatly to improving the trails for public access. So I think I've been able to maintain and improve habitat while also improving access and to trails for public use.
Yeah. So for instance, you know exactly where an endangered species habitat is. And so what you're essentially doing is providing recommendations to the project manager that intends to put in trail and construct it, and ensure that that trail construction is not going to go right through an endangered habitat.
That's correct. So by doing that, making those recommendations or having those mitigations in place, we can still meet our objective to reconstruct trails or improve maintenance or just improve the trails while still protecting an endangered or threatened natural resource.
Yeah, it sounds like the work you do is extremely important, but can you give us, at least the audience, a picture of what it is to be out in the field conducting these surveys? Like, what exactly are you doing out there to help get the data that you need to provide the recommendations?
Sure. I'll give multiple examples since I have experience both with the terrestrial wildlife as well as the aquatic wildlife. So when I conduct amphibian surveys, which we call them visual encounter surveys officially, I'm going out and searching for aquatic bodies or such as, lakes, ponds, springs, as well as stream courses, perennial streams, intermittents that are within suitable range for these specific amphibian species that I've worked with and I'm still currently working with. And I am thoroughly walking up and down along the banks, assessing stream habitat, stream canopy, assessing water quality parameters, and just really assessing the health of the stream habitat, as well as looking for frogs. Looking for aquatic life, the target species being specific amphibians. So pretty much I'm walking up in streams, assessing the habitat and looking for frogs, which is a pretty sweet gig. I can't complain. Just beautiful landscape, enjoying time outside and just getting to be around nature and just getting to be in the streams. That's the aquatic side, but if we were to look at, say, conducting northern spotted owl surveys, that's a little bit different. So if I'm conducting northern spotted owl surveys, the habitat would be completely different, as we're not really focusing on aquatic sites. There may be, drainages running through the landscape here and there, but we're mainly looking at arboreal sites. So we're looking at trees, looking at, for instance, old growth habitat, which is where northern spotted owls tend to focus their areas of utilization in, at least for nesting and breeding. So if I was conducting a northern spotted owl survey, I would be also working at night because owls are nocturnal. So I would be going out, I would be going along my routes, my transects, and stopping at each point that I've established on that transect. And at each point, I would be using an acoustic game or bird caller, and these callers have a list of specific calls for the northern spotted owls because they vary in their calls, whether they're mating or whether it's a male, female. So at each point, I would be playing this bird caller and calling for owls, hoping in getting a response. And if I don't, I just keep moving and keep calling at each point. And if we don't get one, then we don't get one. That means they're likely not in the area. And for each point, to conduct the survey up to protocol, I would have to call 6 times at each point. So that's 6 separate visits at each point. So, and there's many times where I haven't gotten an owl, but when we do get an owl, that's when it gets exciting, because when we do get a response, we do our best to run up the slope and chase down the owl. And if we're able to find the owl, we usually have feeder mice with us, and we would try to mouse them and hoping the owls would come down and either feed on the mice or take it back to a nest, which is the ultimate goal, to determine the status of the owl, meaning are they a single, are they a pair, or are they reproducing?
So you're out there doing this at night. And though I know you said it's pretty exciting when you hear an owl out there, I just feeling when you finally hear an owl, because I know you spend many hours out there trying to find them.
No, when we finally do get one, we get really excited. And when we do get one, we try to pinpoint where it's at. We use compasses and maps, paper maps, to triangulate direction of where that call is coming from. And we use the caller as we get closer to try to pinpoint that as well, to see if it will continually respond, so we get a better and more accurate location of the owl. And when we can actually find the owl and see it visually, to be honest, there's like probably nothing cooler than finding the owl and taking a mouse out of my pack and dropping a mouse right in front of me and backing off away and seeing the owl come down right in front of you and take the mouse. That's probably one of the coolest things ever.
Yeah, that sounds like a National Geographic moment.
Yeah, but and it's even cooler when they take the mouse and they take it back to their nest, and you determine that there's actually babies or fledglings in the nest.
When you're out there at night, like what are the hours that you're working to conduct these surveys?
So in general, we don't start calling owls until pretty much sunset. So it just kind of varies. So in general, the protocol, based on what forest you're at and kind of elevation of the project area that you're surveying, we're supposed to be surveying really from March all the way through July, well, actually August rather. But so from March through August is usually their nesting and breeding season. So that is when we're supposed to be surveying for these guys. Like I said, we start calling at sunset, and depending on how many call points on each transect that we have, a lot of times we can go, to 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. or even 4 a.m. So it's pretty much from sunset to the whole night for the most part.
So what's interesting to me, I mean, not only are you taking surveys at most of a 24-hour period, but it sounds like that you're also, if you're engaged in doing these types of surveys, that you get to go to areas that nobody probably ever goes to, some really beautiful areas.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's more so for the aquatic surveys as rather than the northern spotted owl surveys, just because the aquatic surveys that I've experienced, most of those areas are backcountry areas, high elevation with, limited trails. So there's a little off trail hiking. And I think the aquatic surveys brings me more to the remote places. So for the northern spotted owl, we're really calling mainly off the main roads or spur roads. So that's not really remote. And I mean, that's done for a purpose. We place points on transects on roads. Just working at night, there's a lot of hazards. So we tend not to hike into points as much, just because of safety hazards. And we feel, a lot of these points along the roads can still sufficiently cover the same amount of habitat when you're calling.
So you're doing these surveys for the spotted owl and other terrestrial wildlife in areas where there's already potential for project construction or project planning. And so you don't necessarily need to go beyond where the project area is to make sure that the habitat is going to be protected.
Yes and no. So when I actually conduct an analysis for the northern spotted owls for project units, say like salvage or timber project, the forest will propose a set of units or salvage units or wherever they're hoping to get in and do the work. And from those units, I have to actually create a 1.3 mile buffer beyond those units as part of my analysis area for the northern spotted owls. That's mainly because northern spotted owl pairs, they have a very vast range. So when a northern spotted owl pair, when they create a nest, we call that an activity center. And from that activity center, there's a 1.3 mile area buffer placed on that activity center. And that 1.3 miles represents their home range for that pair. And northern spotted owls are very territorial. So the roads that I have to go on, there are the main roads, but there are also a lot of the roads that I guess most people don't go on in order to reach as much of the habitat in that massive analysis area that I've created to run this analysis to cover the impacts for the spotted owl.
Sorry, just to clarify, when you say salvage projects or salvage areas, are you referring to post-burn areas where a wildfire has already gone through?
That's correct. Yeah. I just use the term salvage just as an example of the type of project that, Forest proposed.
Wow, Joe, that sounds like an extremely important job that you and your crews and everybody in the program that you have to manage and all the people you have to supervise. But I'm really curious as to know, how did you get started with the Forest Service and how did you get to where you are today?
Great question, man. It's been a long, but it's been a pretty adventurous journey. I think, it all started, pretty much when I was younger. I love fishing. I love the outdoors. I think I just started just to really have a passion for it. And I love animals, and I love to go fishing. I spent a lot of my weekends, in high school and in college going fishing. I think it just kind of grew from there. And, right after I graduated from college, I pretty much knew exactly what I wanted to do. And 3 months after I graduated from college, which was UC Davis, I got a job with the forest. My first initial job with the forest was a GS5 fisheries technician working out of Quincy, California, for the Plumas National Forest.
So what degree did you graduate with from UC Davis?
Sure. So my degree was actually wildlife, fish, and conservation biology with an emphasis in fisheries biology.
So Joe, what really got you hooked on a career in the outdoors? Like, do you have an experience or two that really inspired you?
Honestly, what really got me hooked on the outdoors, I think when I was younger, just going fishing with my family and my dad every weekend or most weekends. And just from there, I just knew after, from fishing every weekend all the time, I just knew I wanted to be around water, wanted to be around streams and check out new places, wildernesses, different forests, different landscapes. And just, I wanted to learn new waters and fish new waters. And in fishing new waters, just check out new landscapes. And I think that's what really drove me and developed my passion for the outdoors and aquatics. It's been an adventurous journey. Honestly, I think my first 2 seasons on Plumas, I think it pushed me pretty hard. I worked really hard and, getting thrown into this field a bit. And I got to see how much fun working in aquatics is. Those first 2 seasons, I did nothing but stream condition inventory surveys, pretty much assessing streams and habitat health for fisheries and for amphibians. And it was just an amazing time. I worked on some really great crews, meeting great people, having strong camaraderie, and just spending every day outdoors and spending every day hiking streams and seeing amazing waterfalls and landscapes and seeing awesome wildlife where, most people probably wouldn't see in those areas. I think those 2 seasons really solidified going forward with my decision in this career.
Are there any other skills that you've learned and have become proficient at that you wouldn't have learned otherwise in a job outside the agency?
Good question, Becky. I think a lot of the skills I've learned in the forest and mainly learned in the field work, more so than the office. Being in the office environment, you learn how to, write documents, biological assessments, evaluations, and do the whole NEPA environmental process. But learning, the skills in the field, learning the protocols and how to actually conduct these surveys in the field, and learning what you see in the field is not always correlated with what you see in the textbooks. I think those skills were vital for me in becoming a better biologist and a more knowledgeable biologist. Just going through a lot of the protocols on the ground and learning geological processes, understanding morphology of streams, and just seeing it how the land was laid out, I think gave me a really good foundation in becoming becoming a decent biologist in this field.
So essentially, you've learned how to collect accurate data that's going to be extremely useful for deciding, or at least providing a recommendation to the forest on how the projects need to go.
Yeah, exactly, Becky. Understanding how to collect data, how to do it correctly, and also how to interpret it in a bigger picture, how to analyze it, and with that analysis, how to use that in informing, leadership and other resources, what needs to be done to, maintain or improve areas of concern for wildlife species.
Is there anything that you would have wished you would have known sooner in the career with federal agencies as you progressed through your career at this point?
Honestly, Becky, I've really enjoyed my journey and how I actually got to this point in my career as a GS11 biologist. But I think one thing that's important for people who are wanting to come into this field or wanting to come into the federal service, specifically the Forest Service in natural resources or wildlife, fisheries, botany, I think it's important to know that it's good to actually try different things, get experience in working in multiple resources, not just sticking just in wildlife or sticking just in fisheries or botany or whatever natural resource you're interested in. It's actually, in a way, good to dabble in all sorts. The forest is, in my opinion, promotes a lot of cross training. They want their employees to be well-rounded, not just in one thing. I know we have specific resource specialists for each thing, but it's super helpful when resource specialists are able to know more than what they specialize in.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you have a broader experience in the different specialties, I mean, I'm not saying that you have to go out and do fire and botany and wildlife and, all across the board, but you can also figure out what it is that you want to do. And for me, I thought I wanted to be a wildlife biologist, and I discovered quickly through an internship that really wasn't quite what I wanted. And I became a recreation specialist with the Forest Service. But I think getting those opportunities to at least explore and understand how it is to explore the opportunities out there that might give you a little bit broader experience on those different fields, so that when you do choose the specialty that you want to go into, you have a greater understanding of those other resources. Because when it comes down to it on a forest level, with planning and all these projects that the Forest Service wants to implement, you have to have that perspective to know that other disciplines are working and the angle that they're coming at from. So as a manager, when you work your way up from the field to a management perspective, you have that knowledge, and it's going to help you and the agency overall. Do you have any advice for those that are interested in pursuing this type of career? I'm sure there's educational requirements. Is that true? Or can someone get into a technician series in entry-level positions and build a career that way?
Well, as far as like natural resources, biological botany, or specialists in that aspect, we definitely look for education. I think it's definitely needed. At least, so for example, at the GS5 level, usually the basic requirement is a degree, but I know we're flexible with that if there is experience along with education combination. I did all the temporary hiring, at least for the forest here this year, for biology and all the natural resources, actually. Interestingly enough, I got that honor to do that this season.
For entry-level positions, correct?
Right. So I was doing all the non-fire temporary positions starting from GS5 and going up to GS7s. But we also hired, it's more rare nowadays, but GS4s, which don't require the same amount of education. It really depends on, I would say, the position that someone is applying for. And I would think maybe that, and you could probably know this better than I would, since maybe rec techs would be maybe require a little less education on certain things. I'm not 100% sure for recreation, but as far as biological, we definitely look for at least some education, at least for entry level. Experience is not necessarily needed, but if I can see that they're taking wildlife classes or fisheries classes or any type of biology classes, kind of gearing towards a biological degree, I mean, I definitely take that very much in account.
Yeah, and I think that's what is important for folks to know is that some of the jobs in the agency don't necessarily have educational requirements, but like you were just saying, in the biological sciences realm, being a botanist, a wildlife biologist, fisheries biologist, aquatics, it is probably better to show that you are working toward that because the requirements are a little different. Like you want somebody that knows how to collect data accurately and knows the methods to do that.
Right. And as far as entry level, a lot of that can be learned and taught. I mean, I never expect like a GS4 or GS5 to come in and to know everything. I mean, that's on all levels. I don't expect that from anybody per se, but especially for an entry level, I mean, a lot of that can be learned, like how to collect data properly. But if they're taking those classes, I mean, at least I know they're gearing towards that kind of career and wanting to apply what they know or what they've been learning. And just for me personally, when I'm looking at all these candidates to hire, experience is one thing, but if I'm seeing someone, with all that, with volunteer experience and a lot of education, I think I can see like a passion there, even on paper. Even if I don't talk to them, I can see that passion on paper they have. And that, makes me more willing to give people a chance on that.
Absolutely. And that's always what I tell people. If you didn't get your application in this year, it was rejected for X, Y, and Z. If you really want to get into the agency, you need to get the experience, and it doesn't have to be paid. It can be
Right.
through a number of different volunteer organizations, or even just coming into your local Forest Service district and say, hey, I want to volunteer to do this. This is what I'm interested in. And then for those that know that they want to work for the agency in an outdoor career path, but don't exactly know where they want to go, they can always come in, volunteer, get a vast experience doing different things to get you there. And then also, with recreation, we love to expose people that, yeah, they got a recreation job. It's not necessarily the easiest either, but it's a much easier path to go because if you get a supervisor like me, I always try to give folks the option to go out with folks like you, Joe, and really see what it's like to be in wildlife and aquatics and fisheries, or if they have another passion doing something else and they have that exposure. And I just hope that other supervisors would do that as well for those types of entry level positions, because education is not always in the cards for a lot of folks, but it can be a way to get your name out there and get the experience that you might need to get a technician position with one of the other resources with the agency.
Definitely, Becky. And just the example. So last season, I did have a GS5 wildlife tech. I also took on a volunteer because she had a passion and, she was proactive and, she made a call to me and I was able to talk to her and just see what her interests were. And, we made it happen. She came out, I got her experience working with the hydrologists, mapping out streams, as well as coming out with me and my crew calling for spotted owls. And I know, and she wants to come back again. So I think it's important for those who are interested trying to get in this field, you got to be proactive and, whether it's just to call us, just to, see if you can volunteer. If you can't volunteer even for wildlife, or maybe you can find another department and just to get your foot in the door. And that's just a good way of networking as well.
Absolutely. And I think what most folks need to know as well is that you might have the experience in education, but you also have to realize that a federal resume is completely different from a private industry position. And, seeking out people that can help you develop that federal resume. And that's what Life in the Wildlands does. But you can also go to your local ranger district office, and I'm sure somebody would be more than happy to help you, because we do need more folks in the field. That's definitely a given this day and
Right.
age. There's so many vacancies out there that aren't getting filled because there's just not enough qualified people. But the thing is you have to understand the federal application process to get your resume even qualified into the USA Jobs application system.
Right.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us before time's out?
Just for people who are really have an interest in working with the federal service, I think just being proactive and reaching out, your local federal office, Forest Service office, and I think just being proactive. That's probably the best way to get your foot in the door. I'm obviously looking at USA Jobs for any federal jobs posted. That's always a good start as well. If you really have a passion working in this field and being outdoors, it's really a very rewarding type of job, type of career. You get to work outside, and people you normally work with in the Forest Service, really good people. We're all different specialists, but we all have the same goal. We're trying to conserve and preserve what we have as far as Forest Service and manage it to the best of our abilities, as well as serve the public, be able to provide the public with a beautiful area. It's just a very rewarding career. And and there's so many different aspects of it. And I think that's one of the best things. It's just not wildlife biology. It's just not botany. You can work in fire, you can work in recreation, engineering, hydrology. There's just so many different aspects of it.
And they all work together for the same end goal, the same benefit, which is to protect and sustain our public lands for future generations, which is great. I know that's why I got into it. And I've, like you, have enjoyed just working with a lot of people. It's been a great career. And so I thank you so much for sharing. All right, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your story and helpful information for folks that are wanting to pursue an outdoor career in biological sciences like aquatics and wildlife and fisheries. And also thank you to our audience for listening in with us today. For more stories about outdoor careers, subscribe to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where I will be interviewing outdoor professionals to discover exciting opportunities in outdoor careers, share professional experiences, discuss the hurdles to federal employment, and provide advice on how to overcome these challenges. And if you're interested in outdoor jobs and don't know where to start, or if you already are a federal employee with an outdoor career that's struggling to make it to the next level in your career development, Life in the Wildlands can help you on your journey. Check out our career counseling and federal resume development services at www.lifeinthewildlands.com or call 406-848-1660.